Now, I like myself a long story to read. I don't mind spending hours to read a satisfying story. It gives me time to get comfortable, get immersed in the world, and get attached to the characters. However, there is a line I draw between a story that's a gradual slow burn and a story that's just too goddamn long. But the most irritating one of them all is the bright idea of making a 7+ part visual novel series. Hi, my name is August, and welcome to the August Tale, and I want to help you find something great to read and experience. Today, we're going to talk about multi-part visual novels. I'll discuss what I think are some pros and cons of this type of format, and whether or not I think they are a genius endeavor for storytelling, or a terrible concept purely meant as a cash grab. And with that said, let's begin. There are visual novels where its narrative is entirely self-contained. From the beginning to the end, these visual novels tell a complete story, wrapping up the whole plot while also presenting conclusive heroine routes. It's the full package with a nice little bow on top. But then there are those visual novels in which the developers extend their stories over a long period of time, spanning multiple installments, meant to either build up a larger overall narrative or to dedicate specific volumes to its cast of characters. The 9 series is a great example of this. As the story continues, more plot details about this superpowered visual novel series get introduced, and the stakes get increasingly higher with each installment. In Volume 1, we learn about these items known as artifacts and the supernatural abilities these items give to their users. With Volume 1, its contents serve to act as a prologue, as we learn about the initial cast and the framework of its premise. It's slow in the beginning, but in Volume 2, the 9 series introduces the organization known as Rig Verda, a devious group that plans to use the artifacts for malicious activities, one in particular being murder. Compared to the ambiguous threat in the first volume, there's an active antagonistic force our main characters will have to fight against in the second volume onward. And with the introduction of 9's biggest hidden plot point of parallel worlds, the situation becomes even more dangerous and crazier, ending on a fantastic, bombastic conclusion in Volume 4. Besides 9's grand narrative, each volume puts the spotlight on a particular heroine. The dutiful classmate Miyako, the cheeky gremlin little sister Sora, the shy yet assertive senpai Kosaka, and the justice-seeking arbiter Noah. These heroines have their own personal stories to tell in their own volumes, and the way 9's story is crafted, it uses currently established information to create their own specific climax and conclusion. In 9, the grand narrative is always building up in the background, but sometimes a visual novel series doesn't have to continuously push that narrative. For a series like Flowers, a 4-part Yuri character drama, each volume focuses on the developments between its lead characters. There's an overarching mystery that stems from the first volume's cliffhanger, but it's a minor subplot to the main events. In the Book of Spring, the first installment, we explore the Amity partner system and the romantic tensions between Suo, Mayuri, and Rika. In the Book of Summer, the second installment, Erika gets into a troublesome conflict with a new transfer student Chidori in a classic haters to lovers romance story. These relationships are the forefront of the volume, but the mystery mostly serves as a nice epilogue hook into the next edition. Combined together, these type of visual novel series can use its format to snowball its narrative while also dedicating time for its heroines to shine in the spotlight. However, while its lengthy format has benefits in its storytelling, we can't ignore the noticeable drawbacks in other aspects. Let's address the big one. Multi-part visual novels can be expensive. World End Economica is around $13 for each of the games in its trilogy. Both the 9 series and the Flowers series are around $20 for each of its 4 titles. These prices don't look that bad, right? Now let's take a look at the Grisaya Phantom Trigger series. Each volume is around $14 per release. Not bad initially, until you realize that there's 8 volumes in the series, and counting at the time of this video. That's roughly around $130. Normally, a one-off visual novel doesn't look that bad on its own, but when you consider them all together for the full story, it can be a hefty amount. Sales and package details help lower the overall cost, but for some people, even the discounted price can be intimidating. There's also the question of whether or not the series is worth investing in the first place. Sure, you can buy the first volume to see if you like the series, but its first impression may not be a clear indicator of its potential, and I'll come back to this topic later. The length and the content of the volume matters too. Some volumes might end up being very short. Grisaya Phantom Trigger volumes are estimated at around 10 hours for completion, and the others estimate at around 30-hour completion. But there's also that risk of not getting a fully satisfying experience for the specific volume, or even worse, a weaker, lackluster story in a singular part of a whole cohesive story. Which brings me to my next point. reading visual novel series that don't have completed stories. Okay, I know it sounds like I'm being impatient, but bear with me here. By being part of an extended series, you are at the mercy of whatever content the story decides to put into that specific volume. It's obvious, but these installments aren't the full narrative package and may be designed to build up to its big conclusion in order, which leads to waiting for releases if they aren't out yet. In cases where all the installments are out, this problem is easily resolved, but sometimes the whole series is incomplete, which leads to having people wait for the English localization of the next volume, or even worse, having to wait for the next installment to be released in Japan, and then having to wait even more for its English localization. People joke about how visual novels are just glorified PowerPoint presentations, but these visual novels take time to develop, understandably so. But imagine being a reader, binging all of the released visual novels for a series, and then having to wait a year for its next release. For me, it kills the momentum and builds up excitement. And by the time the developers release the newest installment, I question whether or not I'm still invested into the series, and whether or not I remember what happened in the story prior. God forbid it's an arc that takes 2 partial volumes to conclude. Of course, you can wait until the entire series is out to read it all in one setting, and that's totally understandable. I can't imagine reading a story like Higurashi or Umaneko and not having all of the parts. That would be terrible. But then you have those cases where you could be potentially waiting years to read the entire series. And again, any interest might have disappeared by the time you get to reading it. Or worse, you have something like the Clockwork Leyline series, which hasn't released its 2nd volume in like 4 years. To which at that point, you could learn Japanese and read it in Japanese before an English translation comes along. Despite whether or not the series is complete, deciding if you're interested in the first place is still a concern. Like I mentioned before, there is the option of purchasing the first volume to get a taste, but sometimes a visual novel's first volume might not be an accurate representation of the series or the excitement to eventually come. In some cases, the first volume might act like a prologue to get readers interested in the story, establishing the main cast and what to expect out of the premise for the whole series. Unfortunately, that first volume may feel lackluster or weaker in terms of its content because of it. The 9 series' first volume purely establishes the premise. A murder case is caused by items called artifacts that gives people superpowers. However, the volume spends a good amount of time setting up its initial background and mystery that its focus on Miyako, the dedicated heroine, is sidelined, splitting the story's attention between these 2 main key points. Grisaya Phantom Trigger also falls underneath this umbrella. Its first volume introduces the unique special ops background of the girls of the Mihama Academy, but afterwards it starts diving deeper into each character's specific backstory and specialist role, with more action-intensive missions. In other cases, it's purely story and technical fixes that improve in its next installment that make it even better. Flowers Volume 1's most significant drawback is that Suo, a very shy, reserved, and conservative individual, is chosen as its lead protagonist. And since we are viewing the events from her perspective, the first volume extremely slows down the pacing of the story. It's when Erika becomes the main character in the next installment that she keeps things entertaining with her rebellious, mischievous attitude and various pop culture references. Again, it's in the later volumes where I feel that these stories start picking up momentum. For 9 and Flowers, the second volumes are where the series starts to shine, but if you had never heard that, you wouldn't have known. Sure, people are free to drop the visual novel if they don't like what they see, but I do think it's unfortunate if someone drops a visual novel series before I thought the series was starting to show its full potential. In conclusion, multi-part visual novels might be an effective format for storytelling and could sustain its interest and profit in the long run, but there are drawbacks both in its nature of its format and the external factors outside of the story. Personally, I don't typically like multi-part visual novels because I've had bad experiences with incomplete stories in this particular format. One of my personal favorite anime, Girls in Panzer, is still currently in the midst of its 6th film finale, initially announced back in 2017. It's 2021. There's only 3 films out right now. Another example is the Fate Stay Night Heaven's Feel trilogy movies. At first I was excited for the adaptation for the Heaven's Feel route, and then it was revealed it was going to be split into 3 parts. The movies are all out now, but having to wait a year for a portion of the story waned my interest at the time, especially since after the first movie, I just went back to the visual novel and read the uncut original source material. Tangent aside, I'm still gonna read these multi-part visual novels if it's a series I like, and I can definitely wait. I'm quite used to it. I'm also far too invested into Grisaya Phantom Trigger to quit now anyway. It's just that fear of inconsistent releases or the content not matching my expectations that will end up disappointing me.
You can only hope for good things. Or to learn Japanese in the meanwhile. Now, what do you all think of multi-part visual novels? Do you like them or dislike them, and why? Do you agree or disagree with my points? I would love to know your opinion. And as always, subscribe if you liked the video and want to see more. Check back every week for new content. For more of my thoughts, you can find me on Twitter at TheAugustHale. If you were interested in some of these titles, I have a review for those specific volumes in the description down below. That's it for today.